Hello and welcome to the AVForums podcast for Monday the 28th of November, and joining me on this edition are assistant editor Steve Withers.
I'm having fish tonight.
Audio reviewer Ed Selley.
He said it was called a butt.
And special guest star Mark Botwright.
Can you help me?
Have you got the cold, Mark?
Just a little bit. I'll soldier through though.
Oh, well, thanks for coming and soldiering through.
Yeah.
It's appreciated.
We need to find a way to send Lemsip via the internet.
I hope you're feeling better soon, Mark. If you need to go and have a hot chocolate or whatever, or a Lemsip, as Ed said, then disappear and do that. Happy Cyber Monday, everybody. Does anybody care? Is anybody interested anymore? Has anybody
record sales?
My wife has gone out to buy a computer today, although that was as much influenced by the fact that her computer finally and irrecoverably died last night rather than it being Black Friday today. So she's out and about at the moment.
Is it?
Yeah, it's a conspiracy by the retailers, Steve. Not the fact that it's a 4-year-old laptop that's been beaten to within an inch of its life. 5-year-old laptop that's been beaten to within an inch of its life.
No, I think apparently sales have been really high because everyone's thinking buy loads of stuff now before prices will go up in January thanks to Brexit. So
the B word.
Well, less an issue of people, of Black Friday being more popular and more of an issue of everyone thinking, oh Christ, everything's going to go up in price in January. So
I've seen more coverage from programs saying about how there aren't really a great deal of deals out there than I have about the deals themselves. I've seen more coverage certainly of trying to kind of disprove the myth of Black Friday than I have about Black Friday.
Yeah, I've got to say, looking around briefly, I haven't seen anything that I would go and buy.
No, me neither.
Even the £15 UHD Blu-rays, the ones that were £15, are all the ones I've got already. And I
right, it's a conspiracy, Ed.
And I don't have many to start with, so that tells you how few have been actually reduced in price. Anyway, we need some cheering up, so Mark, why don't you tell us about the current competitions?
Didn't you just send him away to get a hot drink?
No. I shall make my way through it. Current competitions, you can win one of 3 copies of... Yep, that one on DVD. That's open to all members till the 30th of November. You can win one of 3 copies of Tim Vine live on DVD, modern again, open to all members until the 5th of December, and all competitions are open to residents of the UK, Ireland, and the Isle of Man.
Okay, so if you fancy winning some DVDs, and if you remember what a DVD is, the competition's tender, and any previous winners.
Fucking hell. Yes, Phil, there are. Moses has won one. Well done to him. He's achieved a lot in his life. Mark with 3Ks and Jimmy Psychotic won Independence Day Resurgence on 3D Blu-ray. Steve I.O.
Isle of Wight, I imagine.
What?
IOW, Isle of Wight, I imagine.
Or IOU.
All right, Steve.
IOU.
Maybe. Steve IOW won Outlander Season 2 on Blu-ray. Carolwood H. Grout and Tony S312 won Kill the King on DVD. And Matty MC13, Maya Russell and Andrew Rice won Family Guy Season 16 on DVD.
Congratulations to our winners there. And sorry, Mark, I forgot you had a cold when I asked you to do that. I wasn't torturing you, I promise.
I shall mute and have a coughing fit now.
You do that, and I hope you get well soon. Right, let's move on and talk about some hardware, and let's have a review first. So let's go to Steve, and he's put in the running order here that he's reviewed the Pioneer AVR X6300. I think that's a Denon, Steve.
Oh, yeah. Yes, the Denon X6300 is an 11-channel AV receiver. So what it basically means is it's an all-in-one box. You basically have all 11 channels for a full 7.1.4 or even 7.2.4 because it's got 2 sub-outputs. Atmos or DTSX setup. You can also actually add Auro 3D if you wanted to, but that will actually cost you a little bit extra, but you can add that on as a firmware update. And I think if you want the full immersive experience, you definitely need at least 9 channels. You need 7.1.2, but if you can go 7.2.4 right out of the box, then even better. And it means it's nice and tidy. You don't have a second amplifier shoved in there or anything like that. You can do it all out of one box. And it's only priced, and I say only, I know some people have complained, well, how can this be a Best Buy, or this, it's a lot of money, but it's just under 2,000 quid. It's £1,199, but that's for a full AVR with 11 channels built in. And the next nearest competitor to that would be either Pioneer or Onkyo, and they're going to be £2,500. And after that, you're looking at the Anthem, and that's £4,000. So I think price-wise, it's very competitively priced. It's typical Denon, Phil, like the Denon you reviewed recently. It's well designed, it's well made, it's dead easy to set up. It's brilliantly laid out in terms of the back panel, the menu system, the setup wizard are all really well thought out. It's got a nice, intuitive to use remote control. My only complaint there will be it's got no backlight. So even if you're a fellow relatively new to AVRs, I think it could take you through the process by holding your hand and doing everything for you. And so, on that basis, it could even be a good choice. Someone who doesn't know a lot about AVRs. It's been very well designed. It sounds fantastic. My only complaint would be that it's driving 11 channels, so and it's not that big an AVR, so it does lack a little bit of headroom. But given the price point, given what it's doing, I think it sounds fantastic. It worked great with Dolby Atmos. It worked great with DTS:X. It's got every feature you can think of under the hood. It also has, and this is new this year, it has a HEOS included, so that's Denon's multi-room system, and that's set up perfectly. I mean, I didn't actually have to do anything. I just connected to the internet, and when I turned on the HEOS app, there it was. So it couldn't be simpler, really. And overall, I thought it was an absolutely cracking receiver. And well worthy of the Best Buy badge. I mean, it delivered in performance, it delivered in value and features.
Yeah, it's always good when you get a product like that coming along. I mean, yeah, it's £2,000, but at the end of the day, I reviewed the X3300, as you said, and it had superb power for the price. I mean, it's something that Denon do. I mean, all manufacturers quote silly, one-channel driven wattages and all the rest of it. But actually, when you get it set up and it's running multi-channel and it's running 4-ohm speakers like I'm using here, it's incredible how much power you're getting out of these little all-in-one box solutions. So that sounds excellent. And talking about like superb bits of kit that really sort of blow you away, I'm reviewing the Epson EH-TW7300 at the moment, which is a £2,100 1080p projector, but it does the same trick that the JVC does by moving the pixels 0.5 pixels diagonally to up the resolution to Ultra HD resolution. It has a lens cover, a motorised lens cover, which I was astonished at the price point, because I've also got the Sony VW550 in at the minute, which is coming on to, is £8,000? It's around about £8,000. They've done away with the electronic lens cover. You don't get it anymore. It's not on there. So an £8,000 projector dropping it, and you got a £2,100 projector with it, which I thought was amazing. It's got a fully motorised lens shift, so motorised focus, zoom and shift. So that also means it has the lens memory functionality. Again, £2,000 projector, and it's got that. And the other thing is that it will accept UHD Blu-ray, and it boasts HDR, and we both said to each other, Steve, when this came through, yeah, well, it might support HDR, but it won't be an HDR projector. But having run all the testing on it, the actual cinema mode on this projector covers 78% of Rec 2020, which is the highest I've seen of, I think, any display we've measured so far. It tracks DCI to almost 98%. And when I say track, it actually almost falls on the tracking points for DCI P3 colour. And as well, the PQ curve was, although it's not bright, in the brightest mode it was 200 nits. In a mode that I would watch it in, with a contrast at 100, it was round about 138 nits. But still, the image on screen, tons of depth there, because of the PQ curve and because it was doing it correctly. It looked amazing in terms of dynamic range, because you're in a black room and you're watching obviously a reflective screen, because it's, we're talking about a projected image. It didn't get anywhere near the Samsung and the TV in the living room in terms of highlights and spectral highlights and that kind of thing, but you could still tell it was an HDR image. There was more there to the image. And flicking back to the natural picture mode, which is the Rec 709 mode, it was pretty obvious to see the improvements that were there in the cinema mode with HDR content, with the wider colours and all the rest of it. I mean, watching a Blu-ray in that mode was was a bit strange because the colours were too strong. Because obviously,
Yeah.
you know, a Blu-ray is done to Rec 709. If you're watching a DCI P3, you're adding stuff back in that wasn't there in the master, so things looked a bit odd in that mode with Blu-ray. But with HDR, it looks stunning, really, really good. And for £2,100 with a mechanical, fully automated lens memory functionality, lens shift, focus, like I say, the cover over the lens, it is a big beast. It's the same size as the JVC X7000 that was sitting next to. But in terms of the resolution and the HDR image, the dynamic range, the black levels were good. Black levels, see, there was a bit of difference, and this kind of, it was counterintuitive for me. and I discussed it with you on Skype as well, Steve, that in the natural mode, it was 240 nits peak brightness, and I think it was 0.2 nits in terms of the black levels. Yet in the, I'm just grabbing my notes while we're talking about this, yet in the cinema mode, which is obviously the DCI HDR mode, it was 137 nits peak and 0.08 nits in terms of black levels, which was a 1700 to 1 contrast ratio, which doesn't sound a lot compared to the natural, because the natural, like I say, it was 0.2 nits and 240 nits peak brightness, but that was only 1200 to 1. The reason is that there's a filter that's used for the cinema mode, and it's a physical filter that you can hear being moved in and out of the light path. So when you switch to the cinema DCI mode, this filter comes in place and it blocks a certain amount of light. But also you got the PQ gamma curve, which is a bit like, if people are aware of what an S curve looks like when we're talking about gamma, it's dark at the bottom and it's lighter towards 75% and above. That's kind of what the PQ curve does, although it's not as simple as that. But I think that's the simplest way of basically describing it. And that's why there was a difference in terms of the dynamic range and in terms of the nit value. So even though it was only 137 nits, you could up it to 200 nits if you put it in the brightest lamp mode. However, that was really, really noisy and not really comfortable to watch in a bat cave. It maybe would suit a living room environment, but not a bat cave. So the 137 nits, it was more than enough. I was really blown away with this projector. It's kind of turned everything on its head, and I haven't had a chance to test the Sony yet. But the Sony looks really good as well. But I'd be surprised if the Sony does things better than this projector. And when you think about the price point of that, that's pretty amazing, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing the Sony can do that the Epson can't do is obviously the Sony's native 4K. But I'm assuming at a sensible viewing distance, you couldn't really see a noticeable difference, could you?
No, I mean, we've done these tests before in the past, even, you know, from the seating position that I have in that room, which is it's roughly 9 foot from a 110-inch screen. You can't tell the difference in terms of resolution. It's the other picture attributes that you pick up on. It's not the resolution. So we've done those tests in the past with the X7000 and the VW520. I did that last year, and like I say, from that viewing distance, you were picking up other things like the black level, the better black level and shadow detail on the JVC compared to the Sony and that kind of thing, and the better colours on the Sony. So it's other attributes in the image that you pick up on, not necessarily the resolution from those viewing distances. So I have nothing against E-Shift or what Epson do with their 0.5 shift. It's very decent technology at the money that they're asking. And to be honest, like I say, haven't done the Sony yet, haven't measured the Sony, but I can't see it being that much better just on back-to-back viewing.
It's an interesting conundrum, because you're thinking, right, okay, that sounds, because I mean, both you and I have JVCs normally, and you know, you're thinking, well, are the other manufacturers delivering HDR better than the JVC are? Because we both complained about the performance in that particular area, not the rest of it. The standard dynamic range performance obviously is still stellar, but HDR has been a bit disappointing. Sounds like that isn't the case. Your experience with this Epson.
The only thing with the Epson is that they should have called the cinema modes the HDR modes, because if you didn't know that via measuring, and I didn't know that till I actually measured each separate, and it's something that we do obviously with the reviews that people might not be aware of, that we actually go and measure every preset just to see what they are doing and what the colour gamut is in each. But if I hadn't done that, I wouldn't have known off the bat that was the HDR mode, the cinema mode, because normally the cinema mode is the most accurate to Rec 709.
Yeah.
Whereas on this machine, it's the natural mode. That's the 709, and to be honest, out of the box, it hit 709, which again for a bulb-based projector is really, really, really good. So yeah, I mean it's one of these products that comes along. It is £2,100, but at £2,100, it is, apart from the black levels, competing with the JVC and the Sony. No question about that.
That's amazing. I mean,
there's your Black Friday bargain right there.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm only being partly facetious. I mean, let's face it. We see this in all increments of electronics. The laws of diminishing returns. It's very hard to get away from them, and this appears to be, a particularly prescient example of what can be done if you're applied and intelligent at price X, and then price X times 3 brings improvements, but not the wholesale sort of improvements you might have assumed with the change in money.
Well, the thing is that this is the bottom line Epson HDR projector. So there is the TW7300, which we haven't seen yet and we haven't reviewed yet. I'm interested to see what it does.
All of a sudden, you're a bit more interested than you thought you were going to be.
Well, talk about preconceptions, but I went into that review thinking, yes, it's a £2,000 projector. It's going to have this E-Shift type technology. It'll be good. I wasn't expecting to be blown away, and I was blown away. Absolutely. At the price point and what it does, and in terms of the measurements that we've run on it, and in terms of sitting down and actually watching HDR content on it, astonishing what you can get for £2,000 now. The only weakness is the black levels. The black levels are nowhere near JVC and Sony £8,000 price point black levels, but that didn't bother me and it didn't concern me one bit.
Cool.
No, I mean, I've noticed over the last few years, I've done a few Epson reviews, and they have been quietly making really, really good projectors. And obviously, they're also the first ones to put out a laser projector at anything approaching a sensible price. And that's just had an update, isn't it, to include HDR. So it'll be interesting to see how that performance, if we see it at some point. But yeah, I think they have been quietly, and obviously they benefit from the fact that they're a gigantic manufacturer. And so there's a certain degree of economies of scale for them. But they've been quietly making really good projectors. And it looks like this year they've actually knocked it out of the park.
Yeah, totally. And I'll get into more details on this Sony VW 550 in later podcasts, because I haven't really spent enough time with it at the moment. I'm going to spend all weekend with it this weekend. But again, preconceptions going into the review, the 550 and the 500 were identical machines, and I just assumed that the 550 would be just another rebadging and recasing of the same technology. But actually, like I say, it's a different chassis. The design's changed slightly. There's no electronic lens cover anymore. Connections are still where they used to be on the left-hand side, down the bottom side. But the power socket now moves to the back, rear right. And then on the right-hand side, you now have menu controls and menu buttons and so on. So there are physical changes to the chassis. And going into the menu system, there are changes in there. Now, when you feed it an HDR signal, it actually tells you in the picture mode that you're in that the contrast is running at HDR, which is 100%. So some nice little changes there as well. So I spent yesterday setting that up and having initial viewing and videoing it and so on for the video review. And like I say, I'll spend all weekend with that. But again, it's looking like being another step up this year, which is good for Sony, because they could have rested on their laurels like they did with the VW 520 and just released the same machine and changed the model number. But actually, they have made some obvious improvements right out of the box. So it'll be interesting to see how that measures up.
Sorry, I was just having a quick sneezing fit. So obviously Botwright has managed to infect us via an internet line. So that's quite an achievement.
Yeah,
One of us.
I was more worried you were going to make a sort of body snatchers noise. But yes, it's extremely interesting. I mean, in my own sort of small and idiosyncratic way, I'm going to be running a similar pair of reviews in so much as I have got two integrated stereo amplifiers which have got digital inputs as well as analog inputs, so they are self-contained solutions, and one of them is £800 and one of them is £6,690, and I'm pleased to say there are some performance differences between the two, but there are some interesting points in comparison, things that again, on the digital side especially, the law of diminishing returns is a savage set of rules at the moment. and really does have some quite significant effects.
Of course, and it's like anything in life when it comes to products like that, Ed. I mean, you could be talking about Porsche, Ferrari, and McLaren. You know, they all do the same type of thing. But they're all different, and they all have different approaches to doing the same thing. So, yeah, it's interesting that Epson have gone the way they have, and an absolutely cracking projector. Highly recommended. It's not even just a highly recommended; it's a best buy. I think absolutely best buy. Why would you spend £2,000 on anything else? And that's got to be a real upset to Sony, because Sony have ruled that area of the market, Steve, for a number of years now.
Point, yeah.
That price point with the HW40 and the HW45.
I meant to ask you, Phil, sorry, quickly. Is it what colour is the chassis on the 7300?
White.
Does it come in black as well, or is it just white?
Just white.
That's a pity, isn't it?
It is.
What's the issue? Forgive the ignorant question. What's the issue with white projectors? Then?
Well, if you're aiming for a bat cave, you don't want anything white in your room.
Yeah.
Fine. All right. Yeah. Okay.
Having spent months, and I mean literally months, putting black velvet over every single surface in the entire room, including putting in black carpets, the last thing I want to do is then shove a great big white projector in there. I know that the higher set, the 9300 TW.
Yeah, there's two models, the 9300s, but there's the 9300 and then there's the 9300W. And the W doesn't stand for white, seemingly, it stands for wireless.
Yeah, that stands for wireless, although it is white, isn't it?
I think it is, yeah, but I think it's also available in black. So
there is the black version, yes. There is the black version.
But for most people at that price point, they are going to be shoving this into a living room. And I think the biggest concern is not going to be the white chassis, it's going to be the actual size of the chassis. Because this is one big projector. I mean, it's the same size as the JVC X7000, same size as the X5000. They're big chassis. So even to ceiling mount it, you're still going to notice it. It's like the size of an air conditioner. So, yeah. Right, so let's move things along and let's go to Mark. So, Mark, do you have any games news for us?
Yep, sorry, just taking a quick draft of cough medicine. I'm fine for the next 2 minutes. There's not much games news about at the moment, simply because everyone's just trying to push the games themselves. But a little bit of Nintendo Switch news in the sense that GameSeeker, UK retailer, is offering a pre-order price for it of £198.50, and that comes with a price promise of, you will pay no more if the price goes up. The reason this is interesting is simply because there have been a few rumours going about whether the price for this will be closer to, should we say, the handheld section of it, or whether it's more in line with a home console, as Nintendo want to ideally position it as both, depending on which market they're kind of selling it in. £199 for a base SKU, possibly $250 with a game, seems to fall in line with what we know. Money's taken at the point of order, though, which equals now. So obviously that's a drawback. But it does point to the fact that maybe retailers understand what price point this is going to be coming out in anyway. Nintendo will unveil all the details in January anyway, but it's one of those things where it's a retailer trying to jump on board a little bit of the hype to try and grab early pre-orders, and you can't really blame them, because after the mini NES scramble and lots of people with kind of fresh conspiracy theories about Nintendo trying to undersupply, restraining the overall number of units with each retailer to try and create some kind of an artificial buzz, which I think it's a bit mad. They were just conservative. Then there will be people out there who want to consider pre-ordering early, because if it comes in at under £200, I think it will definitely sell and sell well. It
is interesting that Nintendo always come in with a machine that seems to be under-spec'd when you go up against like the likes of Sony and Microsoft, but it always seems to work for them.
Well, in general, it does. It goes back, I think, almost to Gunpei Yokei's Game Boy. He was the creator of the Game Boy. His idea of lateral thinking with withered technology, and the fact if you go back and you look at that in comparison to the Game Gear or the Atari Lynx, it's a case of finding a way to make something profitable. If you look at where they stepped out of that kind of ideology with the Wii U, they kind of struck bad deals. They overproduced early, which again kind of points to the fact that perhaps it's better to go with smaller amounts because it offers you at least the ability to be fairly malleable if you want to, should we say, alter the production techniques, which can lower costs. And they used custom components again, which proved costly. So they were left with an excess of stock and the inability to be able to drop that price because they've got shareholders to answer to. So, you know, the way forward is very much for them to focus on the games themselves, and they don't really need a cutting edge console to do that. However, with Switch, you've got the clear argument that in fact, if anything, it is very cutting edge, but it's simply cutting edge for a handheld.
I had an Atari Lynx. I dropped it in the bath.
What were you playing in the bath?
I was playing computer games in the bath. Well, I was until I dropped it in the bath anyway. It was, as a left-hander, and at that point in my life, I was very left-handed. Being able to flip it over and play it left-handed was really quite handy. But I freely concede the point that the Game Boy had some, despite having feeble horsepower, it had some cracking games on it. Most Cross Maniacs in particular. What a game.
So how many batteries did you get through with the Lynx?
I seem to remember that I was ankle deep in AAAs in my double A's in my bedroom. It was absolutely ridiculous. And my dad thought, okay, that's absolutely fine. I'll buy some rechargeable batteries, and they're really expensive. And the thing is, on the rechargeable batteries, honest to God, it was just about possible to complete a level of a given game before it just twatted the batteries, and then it was another 6 hours of recharging to play it for another 15 minutes. It was just useless.
See, these are still the issues, though, that face a handheld.
Yes, absolutely.
In fact, it's the same you could say with the mobile phone market, which is screen technology continues to move at a faster pace than battery technology. So you have to kind of find some kind of middle point whereby, like with the Switch, people are talking about what will the resolution be, you know, kind of, you don't want to be driving a kind of 1080p or, you know, some kind of even higher resolution screen as like you're getting with certain mobiles. Ultimately, you know, you don't need that in a handheld console, and you go back to with color consoles like the Game Gear and like with the Atari Lynx, they just ate through the batteries so much.
Yeah, my enduring memory of school with, you know, because we all had, you know, most of it had various variations of Game Boy, Game Gear, and you could always spot Atari Lynx and Game Gear users because they were just camped up next to mains sockets, playing them off the mains adapter. And there was the TV adapter for the Game Gear as well. That used to you used to be able to have about enough battery life to watch an episode of Coronation Street, and that was about it. It was all a bit feeble by all accounts. But it all seemed very cutting edge at the time.
Why would you watch Coronation Street?
It was more a reference to a half-hour programme, Phil. I was doing my best.
Okay.
It's early, and I've only had...
Could have been Emmerdale. Could have been, you know...
Yeah.
Brookside.
Is Emmerdale or Brookside even better than Coronation? I don't know. I don't know what the best soaps are these days.
There's more plane crashes in Emmerdale. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, but you've got the legend that is Danny Dyer on EastEnders these days.
This is true. So... Yeah. He was in an episode of Touch of Frost. I was watching it the other day going, he looks familiar. Bloody hell, it's Danny Dyer. Like a tiny child like Danny Dyer. So, yeah, exciting stuff.
I'm now, I've moved beyond handheld gaming or even gaming on a screen now. It's all VR as far as I'm concerned. That's the only thing that matters.
Oh, do one.
None so devout as the converted.
It's interesting, Mark, that what you're saying about just supply and demand, because I do think is a deliberate policy that what you don't want are loads of units sitting on shelves not being sold. You'd much rather have it sell out and have lots of pent-up demand for a product and then release more later, knowing you're definitely going to sell them, than have something sitting on the shelves. So I think they deliberately undersupply. Because isn't the PSVR, that's currently out of stock, isn't it, in this country? And I saw there's a thread on the forums, actually, people were trying to get hold of one and waiting for more to come in.
I think that's coming back into stock.
Yeah, it's coming back into stock, but it has been out of stock for a while.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, if you're going to fall on kind of one side of the two ends of the spectrum, then, yeah, you would want to probably more underproduce something rather than be left with huge amounts of units that, you know, potentially... It also creates a slightly kind of vicious cycle, which is, you know, people see that it's not selling out, people kind of get this idea that perhaps it's not selling well, and then they wait for a deal. Whereas, as we've seen with the little NES Mini, as soon as people think that something's selling out, they're desperate to get a hold of it because they want to prove that they can.
Everyone wants what they can't have, doesn't they? Basically, it's human psychology.
Exactly.
But if you haven't tried the PSVR, I'd recommend having a go on it because it is brilliant.
You keep telling us this.
Yeah. Okay. Right, so let's move on once again. And Mark, before we let you go away and have a coughing fit, what's your game of the month? Because it is the end of the month.
Right. Well, pretty much exactly what I've just been talking about. I'm going to cheat, and as I haven't played any big kind of AAA games, even though we've had Pokemon Sun and Moon out this month, Dishonored 2, Watch Dogs 2, and as we're just probably going out now, Final Fantasy 15, I've pretty much still been playing Battlefield 1 and the NES Mini. Consider it a cheat as a game of the month, but I look at it more as a compendium of 30 games, and that's been the thing that I've been playing mostly, simply because it's a nice little nostalgia trip. For £50, you're getting 30 games, a lot of which will be better than their previous performance on Nintendo Virtual Consoles. The overall price point, if you consider what it would cost you to buy all those games again, the fact that you're getting this nice little replica console and the absolutely perfect NES pad, and the sheer joy of playing Punch-Out again, it's been too much for me. So I'm going to put that and Punch-Out as my game of the month.
Okay, thanks very much for that. Let's move on again, and let's get some sound advice from Ed. This just went up on Friday, and it's how to set up a network system, Ed.
Yes. After all the faffing about with vinyl, this is a very much bare bones, logical, and I hope totally straightforward explanation of what you need and what you should be doing to set up a network streaming system, and not just get it working, have it stable, reliable, and there 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, because there's no quicker way to lose interest and enthusiasm for streaming than to have an unreliable network system. So, as it says in the piece, you're not looking for absolute blazing speed or state-of-the-art equipment. The audio just ain't that big a file to do this. You compared to the strain of running, gaming networks or anything like that, this is nowhere near that. You're simply looking for equipment which is going to be bomb-proof and utterly stable. So it covers the basics there. It once again explains very carefully and as deliberately as possible that you must back everything up, otherwise you're just flirting with disaster. And it discusses some of the hardware options available in terms of storage, in terms of running wired networks over sort of unforgiving domestic terrain. And any questions that crop up, please just pop them in the comments, and we'll see what we can do to further them. It's not a minutiae piece, this. It doesn't go into exacting detail because everyone will have slightly different requirements, but this is all the information there is generally applicable to pretty much everybody, and I don't think that there's anything contentious there. So just have a look through it and see if there's information you find useful.
How 21st century from you, Ed?
I'm doing my best, yeah.
Like we said, it is the end of the month, Ed, so what's your album and vinyl releases of the month?
Album of the month has caught me a little bit by surprise because I haven't actually bought much that's new. I would say on balance, bringing it back up again, that the thing that sort of struck me as being certainly worth a bit of a listen if you're come on you, it's having a bit of a moment all to itself. Whilst I remember there's a Black Friday deal which will extend to the Monday when this comes out. If you liked that Frank Ocean album that came out and was exclusively on Apple Music, it is having a physical release, but for a very, very short space of time. So whilst I remember, that is something that you might want to look at. And then album of the month, the one that actually sort of struck me, there's sort of two answers to this. The new Metallica album is actually quite nostalgically brilliant if you're into that. It
is absolutely superb. I've had it running all week on Tidal. As soon as they disappear underneath me at 5 o'clock at night, that gets turned up to 11. It is absolutely stunning, especially with the sub running at the same time. Superb.
Yes, that's a lot of fun. I would also say that I've been thoroughly enjoying the new album by Justice, the French electronic group called Woman. It doesn't break any new ground for what Justice do, but it's just good, powerful, funky fun. So that's well worth a listen as well. I've spent a bit more time. The vinyl release is a bit more exciting because after a mere 15 years of it not being available, you can now buy the soundtrack to the film Fight Club on vinyl again, and it's an absolutely blinding soundtrack if you've never heard it before. What's going to be more fun is it turns up in packaging which is going to cause my obsessive compulsive disorder some problems. Let's just leave it at that. The reason I'm not going to give too much away is, as part of my practicing for CES, I'm being instructed by Phil and Stuart to shoot test sequences and stuff like that. One of the test sequences I'm going to shoot when it turns up is me opening this record, probably because you'll get to watch me cry on screen. It's a bit different.
Put sandpaper on the inside.
It's not sandpaper on the inside, but there is an element of destruction to it, which I'm going to struggle to overcome. So I figure
someone actually do that once, Ed.
Yes, New Order did a 12-inch single with sandpaper on the inside liner because reasons. So yeah, I will video this because I figured that you can gain some amusement out of my physical pain. So it's on order, it will turn up. But as I say, it hasn't been available for 15 years. If you wanted an original copy of Fight Club on vinyl, it's at least £100. This has to come in from the States, so it won't be that cheap. I think I paid £38 for mine. But it looks like an absolutely fantastic pressing, and it is a truly great piece of music in its own right. The only film score that the Dust Brothers ever did, mainly because they felt they couldn't actually do any better than this one. So unquestionably my vinyl release of the month, and there should be some unintentional physical comedy as a benefit as well.
Excellent. So that wraps up our hardware for this week, and next we're moving on to movie news. Okay, so moving on to film news, and I think that the first bit of film news is that I've used my unlimited pass this month.
Hooray!
Only the one film though, so I'm still I think about £7 down. It was £11 for that ticket, so or if I'd paid for it, it would have been £11. I went to see Arrival, and I have to say, best film I've seen in a long time, Steve. It was absolutely stunningly good.
Yeah, it is a really, really good film. And if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend you go out and see it because it is well made, well acted, intelligent, really interesting, full of really interesting ideas, which great science fiction should always have. I also think it's beautifully shot. It looks stunning. And it's easily the best film I've seen this year. And I really can't wait to get it on Ultra HD Blu-ray.
I think it's going to look absolutely beautiful in that. It was really well shot. It's one of these. It's shot in such a way that if you have a projector that is not capable in the blacks and the shadow details, you're going to struggle with it, because thankfully I saw it in a digital projector which in the cinema which was able to do it, but I could see that some of these scenes, the way they were shot, the murkiness and so on, could just turn into a big black mess depending on what it's watched on. So yes, it will be interesting to see the disc transfer and to see how that stands up. But yeah, film of the year so far for me. And
I take it that's the film of the month then, sorted.
Yeah, there you go, that's our film of the month. Yeah, Arrival. Go and see it. It's well worth it. Right, let's move on to films coming out this week, Steve.
So this week we've got quite a bit coming out. We've got Sully, which, as Ed pointed out a few weeks ago, is not a sequel to Monsters, Inc., but is actually about the miracle on the Hudson, about Sully Sullenberger, was it, who landed his plane successfully on the Hudson River, which I think is the first and only time a pilot's ever managed to land an aircraft successfully on water.
Did you know? Do you know that happened on the day I was coming back from CES, and we were doing not what we do now, where we fly direct, which is a godsend, but back in those days we actually did connecting flights, and we were connecting through Charlotte, and Sully was actually flying to Charlotte.
That's where they were going, weren't they?
Yeah, and when we landed in Charlotte, I was a smoker back then, so I left my bags with, I think it was Chris McAneny, it was Chris McAneny I had been at CES with, so I had my bags with him, and I went outside to have a cigarette, and outside there was just news truck after news truck after news truck, and people walking around with cameras on their shoulders and stuff, and lights and all the rest of it, and I'm wondering what the hell's going on here, and nobody would tell us anything. Nobody knew why the news crews were there or anything like that. And it wasn't until we landed at Heathrow and I walked past WH Smith and here's this photograph on the front of the Sun newspaper of the plane in the Hudson did we finally realise what was going on, because we were actually flying US Airways, which was the company. So yeah, I'll always remember that. Always remember that. Very, very strange. Going out having a cigarette and all these news crews around.
Yeah, and so we've got Tom Hanks, who's playing Sully, and it's directed by Clint Eastwood. And yeah, I've seen the trailer, and obviously we know what happens. But what the film is about is not just the actual the crash or successful landing, I suppose, but also the aftermath and the investigation that went into it. So it does look quite interesting. And Sharuna actually saw this at an advanced screening, so the review will be up middle of this week. Also, we've got Snowden, which is the new film from Oliver Stone, obviously about Edward Snowden, with Joseph Gordon-Levitt playing Snowden. And again, looks interesting in the trailer. It sort of goes into his background and, why he did what he did, tries to explain it, and also goes into what the NSA were up to behind the scenes in terms of spying on Americans and everybody else by the looks of it. And it's Oliver Stone, so, whilst he frequently has an agenda, often Stone surprises because he'd made a surprisingly sympathetic film about Nixon, and an equally sympathetic film about George W. Bush, which surprised me given that he's very left wing. So he can always surprise in terms of his subject matter, but he's never boring. And I think Oliver Stone, he's never a boring filmmaker. And I think it would be an interesting subject and something that probably Oliver Stone, given his conspiracy theory background, would probably really make a meal of. So that should be quite good. And we've also got Bleed for This, which is a true story about a boxer who broke his neck in a car crash, I think it was, and then was told, not only will you never box again, but you may never walk again. Not only did he walk again, but he also boxed again. And that stars Miles Teller, who was in Whiplash, among many other things. And that also looks very good. If you like a boxing film, that could be right up your street, based on a true story, as I say. And finally, we've got Moana, which is the new Disney animated film, obviously coming out just in time for the kiddies to watch it for Christmas. And is it half? No, it's not half term. It's already gone, isn't it? So I guess it's just timing for Christmas. And that includes many voices, but it also includes the voice of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. What the hell was that?
That was me. Coffee before I hit the mute button. Sorry.
It includes many voices, but it actually includes the voice of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson. So I may have to go and see it. Oh, no, actually, in fairness, Disney have been on a bit of a roll recently in terms of their animated films. Zootropolis, I think it was called in this country, I thought was absolutely superb. So they've had some really good animated films recently. And I think the addition of The Rock could only make it better.
I don't know how he's managed to be the world's highest paid actor. That baffles me.
Basically, he's very charming and personable. People like him. He works bloody hard. He makes a lot of films. And also he does a lot, he's got a good manager and does good deals. But his films make money.
Yeah, because that's you keep going to see them all the time.
Yeah, it's me, mainly because of me. But
so Withers has made him the richest man in the world, richest bloke in Hollywood. Just him.
Yeah, he's responsible for it, so you know who to blame. We've done our film of the month, so let's move on to Blu-rays released this week.
This week we've got Finding Dory, the sequel, of course, to Finding Nemo. Available as both 2D and 3D Blu-ray. Saw it at the cinema, and so did you. Did you not, Phil?
Yes, very forgettable.
When you were using your card.
Yes, very, very forgettable.
Yeah, it is. It's well, you kind of worry about Pixar a bit in a way because they said at one point I think they weren't going to make needless sequels, but they seem to be doing an awful lot of needless sequels because we've got this. We've got I don't know. I think we're talking about this with you, Ed, wasn't it? The new teaser for Cars 3.
That looks bleak as you like. Do you know what? It's done its job because I'm really intrigued about that. I mean, I want to see how you square what that teaser trailer shows with it being a kids' film. Honestly. So,
Finding Dory, a rather unnecessary sequel to Finding Nemo. The animation's fantastic, obviously. There are some interesting characters in it. There are interesting bits and bobs, but I found it to be largely forgettable, as you said, Phil, when I saw it at the cinema. But I'm sure it'll be an excellent Blu-ray.
I am trying to remember what the plot is now. That's how forgettable it is.
Dory's trying to find her parents, isn't she?
Yeah, I know that bit, but I'm trying to remember bits of the film, and I'm struggling.
It spends a lot of the time at that marine park, which I think is always a mistake. My friend and I had this theory that if you're making a film, always keep moving. So if you look at Nemo, it's constantly going for new locations, isn't it? It keeps moving forward. Whereas this kind of gets to the marine park and then spends way too long there. So it stops moving forward and it's just the same place over and over again. But largely forgot. I'm sure it'll be a fantastic looking Blu-ray and both 2D and 3D. We've also got Jason Bourne.
Saw that at the cinema as well.
You did. These are all the films you saw during that brief period when you went mad with your card.
Yeah, back in the summer when I first got it, I think I went 2 weeks in a row and I went and seen everything that was shown.
Jason Bourne, greatest hits package, basically. Entertaining, but nothing new. And frankly, given it reunited Matt Damon and Paul Greengrass, I expected more.
What I would say, Stephen, I think I've said this before, is I think I said it actually when I saw the movie and we were discussing it on the podcast, is if you haven't seen the original Bourne trilogy, just go and see Jason Bourne, because it's all the films in one, basically.
That's coming out on Blu-ray and Ultra HD Blu-ray, so that's fun. That's good news. Expensive for me, but there you go. They're also releasing, by the way, all the Bourne films, the 3 original Bourne films and the Bourne Legacy on Ultra HD Blu-ray as well to go along with this release. So
how do you do this? You must have a job on the side to pay for all this, Steve.
I'm having to pimp myself out of the docks, and it's really not.
Yeah, and at 50p a time, you can imagine that the.
Hang on. That's well overpriced.
Yeah. So what else have we got? Star Trek: The Animated Series. Now, this is getting its first release on Blu-ray and on disc of the series. And now I remember this as a kid because after Star Trek, the original series was cancelled, they did a season and a half, basically, of animated adventures, half-hour animated adventures. I mean, they were aimed at kids, but they were written by the writers that wrote the original series, and they had all the voice cast of all the actors from the original series, like Nimoy and Shatner and everybody else, and it was really good. And I remember them being some really good episodes in that. So that's actually, if you're a Star Trek fan, that's actually quite a big release and certainly something you want to be looking at. We've also got Abel Ferrara's Gorilla Killer. That's an Arrow video release. Now I put it on because if you're of a certain vintage, and I'm sure you guys can remember too, the Video Nasty furore around in the early 80s when videos first came out, and the Driller Killer was included in that list, but only really because it isn't that bad. But it's had a really graphic cover on the box, didn't it, of the guy drilled through his forehead and blood coming down, and that's the main reason it got banned, rather than because of the actual content of the film. But that's had a really nice restoration by Arrow, and so if you're a fan of sort of late 70s, I'm going to say horror films, but it's not really a horror film, it's a bit more than that. But if you're a fan of that kind of thing, then that's coming out this week. And we've also got Jinnah, which is an interesting film. This is a film about the guy that basically founded Pakistan, being played by Christopher Lee, which I guess casting-wise probably wouldn't happen so much now, given that Christopher Lee is not Pakistani. But Christopher Lee himself said he thought it was his best performance. And the film was a huge hit in Pakistan, obviously. That's coming out this week. So that's an interesting title, if you're a Christopher Lee fan, to see him doing something where he thinks it was his best performance. Also, it's a competition prize. And we've got Tim Vine Live, which is another competition, as we mentioned at the beginning of this podcast.
The problem with Tim Vine is he's a very, very funny man, and it's all one-liners and puns and all that kind of thing. But that's fine for 15 minutes. For an hour and a half, it soon becomes very, very old, very, very quickly.
He does hold the world record for the most gags told in an hour.
Yeah.
Are we sticking the boot into the other competition prizes as well?
No.
We normally do that during the point where we tell you what you can win. You can win this, and it's shit.
Here's what you would have won.
Yeah. No, I just thought that was a point to make about Tim Vine. I mean, I have sat through one of his live shows, and like I say, for 15-20 minutes, it's good fun. It then becomes very old very quickly, because it's all the same stuff. It's not like other comedians who tell a story and come to a punchline. It's just one line, punchline, or it's a play on words, pun. Which I say, great for 20 minutes, becomes very old very quickly. So moving on, what are our Blu-rays and UHD Blu-rays of the month, Steve?
Blu-ray wise, a couple of titles. One I'm going to mention because it's an interesting anomaly. It's a great disc, and we discussed it last week, which is the BFG, Spielberg's most recent film. Now, in the States, that was released by Disney, but in this country, it was released by Entertainment One. And in this country, it's got a Dolby Atmos soundtrack. whereas in the States it does not, because Disney don't do that at the moment. So, and I thought it was a great soundtrack, and whilst not the perfect adaptation of the BFG, I think Ed's wife made some comments about that last week's podcast.
That's an understatement.
It does look stunning and it does sound stunning. However, my choice for the month is easily is season 6 of Game of Thrones. In my opinion, probably the best season so far. It contains the single best Arab television I've ever seen in the Battle of the Bastards. It's got a fantastic picture, and it's got a Dolby Atmos soundtrack as well, and absolutely stonking release there. So that would be my choice in terms of Blu-ray. And in terms of Ultra HD Blu-ray, and this is going to be the US release I'm talking about here, because there are differences between this and the UK release. And again, a lot of people have been slagging off the film itself. I think both Phil and I rather enjoyed it at cinema for what it was. But I think the Ultra HD Blu-ray release by Sony Pictures of Ghostbusters, the new Ghostbusters, is a stonking release. It's got a fantastic picture, fantastic sound, but they did a full release. So you get the Ultra HD Blu-ray, the 3D Blu-ray, and the Blu-ray, plus all the extras in a single package, which I wish more studios would do rather than separating it. And if you want a 3D version, you have to buy that separately. I know that's not necessarily a big market anymore, but it would be nice if people could do that. Sony did that. But in this country, for some reason, it's the Ultra HD Blu-ray, the Blu-ray, and a bonus disc, a bonus Blu-ray of extra features. I think most people probably would have rather they included the 3D Blu-ray, but that would be my choice of Ultra HD Blu-ray release for this month.
Okay, I'm a little bit behind you when it comes to these things. So my Ultra HD Blu-ray of the month is Star Trek Into Darkness. Really impressed with that, even though it's a 2K DI. The IMAX scenes look absolutely stunning. The only annoying thing is watching that on a projector, on a scope screen, doesn't work. You'd have to blank.
Unless you mask it.
Yeah, you'd have to blank it and mask it, and why do that? Because you're ruining the best aspect of that release, which is the IMAX scenes. So yeah, it's one of those releases that's annoying on a projection screen, but on a 4K HDR TV, it looks absolutely stunning as well. Absolutely stunning. So yeah, I was happy with that one. But like I say, I'm a lot further behind than you, Steve. So I guess what will happen each month is that you'll be at the cutting edge and I'll be catching up.
Honorable mention to Star Trek Beyond as being another great release this month as well.
Oh yeah, I forgot about that. I'll have to go and get that. Complete the set, as they say. Right, okay, so Ed, what's your Ultra HD Blu-ray of the month?
I have no idea. I haven't actually bought a film on any format this month. Lots of records, no film. Sorry.
Okay, and I'm sure Mr. Botwright is the same. He doesn't have a Blu-ray or a UHD Blu-ray, or do you?
No.
No. Okay, and you don't have one for the month that you'd recommend?
No.
Good. Glad we cleared that up. Let's move on. Is there any UHD updates to be had, Steve?
Not really, no. There's been a couple of titles and stuff coming out in the new year, but nothing major.
Okay.
They still seem to be dragging out old catalogue titles, which beg a belief as to why they're doing that. Instead of bringing out something like Lawrence of Arabia, you get Sony releasing Underworld and Resident Evil Aftermath. So there you go. Okay.
So let's wrap up this segment with TV series of the month. So what are our picks for the best of the TV? Steve?
Well, interesting. I'm going to go with something that I loved. I've seen the previous 2 seasons, really enjoyed it, and it was on Channel 4 originally, but now it's moved to Netflix, as do many things. But it's Charlie Brooker's Black Mirror. If you haven't seen Black Mirror, I think it's a brilliant series where they basically take technology and give it a sci-fi spin, but in the sort of realistic near future view, and often with a satirical edge to it. And the new season, clearly Netflix are giving a bit more money to them than Channel 4 did. They've got some quite big names in it. But again, they address modern life with a spin, with a slight sci-fi spin to it, but also a very satirical edge. And they are excellent and certainly worth checking out. If you haven't seen Black Mirror, you can watch all 3 seasons on Netflix as well. So they're all there and they are all worth seeing. They are excellent.
I thought the Bryce Dallas Howard one was very, very good, but that's mainly because I have something of a soft spot for Bryce Dallas Howard. I'd watch her read the phone book, to be honest. So yeah, that was quite good.
Okay, so Ed, do you have a TV program of the month?
Westworld is ticking over perfectly nicely, so I'm not going to say that again. You're either on board with Westworld or you're not, or you're Phil, who is aware of the concept of Westworld and is apparently going to watch it at some arbitrary point in the future.
There's just too much TV. There's just too much TV to watch, Ed.
First world problems, mate. First world problems. I'm going to actually say that I'm starting to really enjoy the young Pope on Sky Atlantic. Mm-hmm. I think it's there are times when you think actually this is a bit dreadful, but there's something astonishingly compelling about the character that Jude Law is playing. It is at times deliberately weird, and sometimes I think it's trying to be too clever for its own good. But on balance, it is a very enjoyable hour of television. I've been really enjoying it. So you can join me in that if you see fit. Alternatively, I also watched the first episode of John Claude Van Johnson, and I thought that had some potential as well. Nice to see someone engaging in a little bit of self-mockery.
Okay, cool. My pick of TV series of the month, we've only had one episode, well, we've had 2 episodes now at the time of recording. That's The Grand Tour. I was blown away by how good it actually was. I had my concerns that giving them too much money, it would just become an over-the-top piece of rubbish that they are more than capable of making, because when we got to the later series of Top Gear, it was starting to go that way, wasn't it? But I have to say the first episode, the way they introduced it, the guest section was hilarious. I was,
who was the guest?
You can't spoil it.
We kind of spoil it. You're gonna have to see it, because it is really, really funny, really funny. And then we had the Holy Trinity, which Chris Harris had done a year ago on the same track, the same cars, the same tyres, and it felt like a bit of a repeat of what Chris Harris had done a year ago. He'd done it on his channel before he was part of Top Gear as well, so he'd done it separate to that. But Grand Tour, 2 thumbs up from me. It's absolutely brilliant. I'm really looking forward to it. I think they've got the chemistry back. I think the writing's really good. I think the ideas are there again, and I quite like the concept of them moving the tent around the world and having different audiences, because it was quite funny with the American audience. Obviously, they went for the obvious jokes and that kind of thing, but I thought they did it really well, and it's just good to have the 3 of them back. I think there's a real chemistry there. So that's my TV series of this month and probably next month as well.
Guarded thumbs up from me on that.
Why is that, Ed?
I thought it was visually beautiful, and there are some, as you say, there are some interesting ideas. I don't want to be a complete downer on it. I do get the feeling, body language wise, that James May is. I don't know if if his heart is completely in this. I've got to be honest, but we'll see how it goes. It's certainly worth a watch. As something I get free because I like having Amazon stuff delivered in a prompt and an efficient fashion. I can't argue with that. And it does look, even in bog standard 1080, it still looks superb.
Oh, in 4K, it was absolutely beautiful. Although I haven't been able to get it to play in HDR for some strange reason, even though I'm watching it on the Samsung KS9500 with the Amazon app. It didn't seem to be in HDR, which was annoying, because
Is it an option, or is that?
No, it didn't come up as an option, and it doesn't come up. It doesn't switch the TV into HDR mode when you're watching it. So I don't know what's wrong there, because I'm reading Twitter and other people are saying that they're getting it in HDR.
Have you tried using the K500 instead?
No, I haven't tried that yet, but I could try that. I'll give that a go and see. But it should work on the TV, which is annoying.
It should do, yes.
But in 4K it looks absolutely beautiful. It really does. I'm going to go and watch it on this Sony native 4K projector just to see what it's like as well. That should be good. Right, Mark, what's your TV series of the month?
Well, it's been going on for a little while now, but after Ed's kind of impassioned defense of MasterChef, I'm going to choose another reality TV show, and I think in this month The Apprentice has hit new heights. It's always had kind of a motley collection of kind of weird chancers, flakes, and wide boys. But just for one particular episode, I think it was the start of this month, where we saw the use of mime artists in an episode, proper apprentice-style blue sky thinking, when someone can say, how do you grab people's attentions? And then waits for a response and says, mime artists. And then proceeds to mime riding a bicycle with a big smile on his face. I think it was just one of the funniest things I've ever seen. So, yeah, The Apprentice this month.
when the BBC does unintentional comedy, it's some of the best comedy they ever do. Same with going back to MasterChef, the scene with the sea urchin is just still one of the finest pieces of physical comedy that's ever been broadcast, even if they weren't intending it to be that when they started.
Okay, I'll have to go and have a look at that on YouTube then.
It keeps being taken down. I don't know why the BBC so zealously guards something that really is just a sort of just curious fragment from the past. But yeah, it hopefully it's up there at the moment. It had been removed a couple of weeks ago, but we'll see how we are.
And I've got to say, Mark, I mean, obviously it's the length of time that this podcast is taken to record this week, but even in the last few hours, you've really perked up, and it looks like that cold's disappearing.
Yeah, well, I'm hitting the cough medicine and having my lifetime supply of Strepsils seemingly in a fortnight. But other than that, yeah, doing all right now.
Just don't OD while we're still recording.
On the cough medicine.
It's a cry for help.
Right, to wrap up this week, Rogue One tickets came out. Don't worry, folks, we're not gonna talk about this for too long. But Rogue One tickets did come out for sale. I have got mine's at 1 minute past midnight on the 15th of December. I have no doubt, Steve, that you're probably about 4 minutes after midnight.
It's 12:05 that the programme starts. Yes. So
okay. Well, that's when the
essentially
adverts
the
start.
same time as you.
Yeah.
That's when the thing starts. So it's 12:30 is actually going to kick off, but.
Yeah, my main concern is that I'll probably fall asleep at that because I struggled yet again last night to try and stay up and watch episode 2 of the Grand Tour, and I got to 11:30, and again I just had to call it a night. So how I'm going to manage to stay up to midnight maybe it'll be the adrenaline and the excitement that keeps me going.
Yeah, you will. Don't worry, you'll be fine.
Yeah, Edward, have you bought your ticket yet?
I have. I'm just momentarily concerned that I might have double booked myself. However. I'm supposed to go at 8:15, but I'm also supposed to attend the annual unaffiliated journalist Christmas piss up, and I've got to be honest, I might well end up going with the Christmas piss up. I'll have to see what happens. But yeah,
that wouldn't be like you to put alcohol above everything else.
Well, I know it would be a massive run against form, or not, as the case may be. I'll get to see it early, trust me, but it just occurs to me that I might have essentially before we all go blind, we actually managed to get some quite useful networking done for the benefit of AVForums and other sites. So, I'll see where it goes from there. I'm just checking my tickets now.
Yeah. I like the idea that the antisocial group in the cinema will be a little motley crew of drunken journalists complaining about the sound design.
No, wait a second. You're all fine. The Christmas piss up is Tuesday the 15th of December. Rogue One is Thursday the 17th, isn't it?
Yeah.
No.
Well, no, you're seeing on the
15th is the Thursday and the 13th is the Tuesday.
Okay, right. I'm very confused then. I've no idea. Because I've got a ticket here which says Tuesday the 15th of December. So I'm booked in at 8:15 p.m. I might be going, I might not. I'll hopefully have it all resolved by next week.
I'd be asking the ticket provider if they actually want you to attend the event or whether
do one. Actually, no, hang on a second. I know exactly what's gone wrong here. I'm just looking at last year's ticket because I'm a complete idiot. Monday the 12th of December.
That's correct.
Yeah, that date does exist.
Yeah, hooray! So no, we're going to see it at 8:15 on PM. So Phil will have already watched it 29 times, but I'll get to see it on the first day.
Well, that does mean we will talk about it on the Friday morning podcast recording.
Oh yeah, that's going to be hell for everybody that listens.
Yeah, well, we'll see.
You bring up an interesting thing there, though, is that I'm going to go and see it numerous times, and I guess it gets you thinking as to how many times have you actually been to see a film at the cinema, and it's a question that's been raised on the running order, funnily enough. It wasn't something that I came up with. It must have been you, Steve. But thinking about how many times I've been to see a film at the cinema, apart from maybe going 2 or 3 times, I can't remember now. I think it was twice I went to see The Force Awakens. The only other film I can remember going to see more than that at the cinema was Jurassic Park. And that was because I went to see it, absolutely loved it. I then tried to take every single friend, male or female, that I could to go and see it again and again. And I think I maybe saw that into double figures. Maybe.
Blimey. I've seen Cool Runnings twice. That's it. That's the only time I've been to the cinema more than once.
Why did you go and see Cool Runnings twice?
Couldn't follow the plot first time round.
Do you know what? Do you know what? Actually, Botwright is closer than he knows, because the first time I saw it in a French cinema in French, and it was called Rasta Rocket.
Well, that was...
Rasta Rocket is a great title.
Well, absolutely. I then went to see it again in English to catch up on some of the finer details of what was going on, because my French was only serviceable at the time. So, that's it. Otherwise, I've never done it.
I watched the French film version of Absolutely Fabulous in a cinema in Paris, completely in French, which was called Absolument Fabuleux. And interestingly, I managed to follow it. A lot of the jokes were ported over from the TV series, so some of them I remembered. But my fairly rubbish French managed to get me through it. A lot of it was physical comedy anyway, so it was okay.
Right. And how many times have you been to the cinema, Steve?
Well, there's a definite trend here, because the film I've seen the most times at the cinema is Star Wars, which I've seen 7 times at the cinema. After that, it goes to The Force Awakens, The Phantom Menace, which I saw 4 times at the cinema because I was frankly in denial. I've also seen Jedi 4 times at the cinema. No, Empire, 4 times at the cinema. I've seen The Force Awakens and Jedi 3 times at the cinema. Attack of the Clones twice, and Revenge of the Sith just the once. So those are the...
I'd forgotten about The Phantom Menace. That was one I saw about 4 or 5 times, actually. I'd forgotten about that one.
You've been trying to wipe that from memory, haven't you?
Yeah, that's exactly why.
I'm already
like
seeing
a study in how
Rogue One.
susceptible people are to hype. How many times people saw The Phantom Menace at the cinema.
I think the first 2 times it was in disbelief, and then the next 2 times it was trying to come to terms with how rubbish it was. Because I think if everybody was being honest and thought back to The Phantom Menace, on the first viewing, I don't think people thought it was as bad as it was. I think there's a lot of rewritten history around The Phantom Menace, to be honest. I think it was on multiple viewings that people, and thinking about it and how it felt a bit, because the same happened with The Force Awakens, just not to the same extent. The Force Awakens, nobody could say a bad word about it for the first few times, and then it slowly and gradually built into, well, this is just A New Hope redone, and JJ's playing it ultra safe and all that. But for the first few days, there wasn't that vibe. And the same with Phantom Menace. I think if we're being honest, and people are being honest with themselves, I don't think there was the immediate backlash that people seem to have rewritten history, remember it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Definitely remember seeing good reviews for The Phantom Menace when it came out. And then gradually it became, people going to, the backlash started. I'd actually read the screenplay before I went in to see the film, so my expectations were fairly low. After a period of, massive hype, I thought this is not going to be good, because the whole midichlorian thing was putting me off. But I kept going back in a desperate attempt to think maybe if I see it for the 4th time, it would be better. It wasn't. Okay,
so interesting that those are our choices. So let's go to Mark. Mark, have you been more than once to see a film at the cinema?
Nope.
Okay, well, on that bombshell, that is it for the AVForums podcast this week. So my thanks to Ed Selley.
Come back.
Steve Withers.
Just keep swimming. Just keep swimming.
And Mark Botwright.
Barbara?
Don't forget, you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook, bookmark AVForums for latest reviews, news and video, and of course, leave us those 5-star ratings on iTunes. It is appreciated, but only if you enjoyed the show. We don't want to force you to do that. I'm Phil Hinton. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.